Howdy. This is the first time I've ever recorded a video from the driver's seat of my car. I don't know, right? So, we are getting ready for Jaja to have a litter of puppies next week. And so we've been going on hikes, and especially I live now in a little cabin on the east side of the Sandia Mountains. My studio is on the west side. So, well, all right, let's just see what's in between here and there. Because pretty soon we're going to be at the cabin a lot, taking care of a litter of little stinker pantses. About to be so outnumbered. But anyway, when I go off in hiking in the woods and stuff, it's great to have a map and everything, but it's also really important to have a compass. When I get over the mountains to the other side where the city is and where all the people are, then you need a moral compass. So that's what I want to talk about right now. My studio space, I've been there for about a year now. A whole year. It's been a year. And I've become friends with little mama. I've become friends with the owner of the facility where my studio is because she's into sewing also. Her compass is way skewed. And, at first we had some friction, just because she's got really bad manners. And usually I judge how close I'll get in a relationship with a person based on their manners. And then she's at the point where I'm like, yeah, I'll talk to you about sewing, but I don't want to talk to you about anything about my personal life. She's always trying to invite me over her house. I do not want to get any more involved with this woman, but she has never really taken the hint and continues to talk to me about, I'm allergic to gossip, and so there's that. We're having a sewing meetup on, not just me and this woman, but me and a whole group of people. When I first got here, she was one of the founding members of a sewing group. And I wouldn't say I'm a founding, member, as in I founded the group, but I was one of the first people who ever came there. And now it's grown to, really quite something. We're having 2 separate meetups in different locations this weekend, and I'm really excited. I'm going to cut out some raincoats, just getting stuff ready so that I can just stay at the cabin and not have to go back to my studio very much. And I kind of am thinking I want to move because of some of the things that this woman has been talking to me about over the past couple months and what I decided to do about it. So one of the things that really skews a person's moral compass is money. And this woman is very wealthy, and she also has no agency because she has basically pandered to the lowest common denominator of what women can do, and has given up all of her own agency and power and potential and emotional stability and all of that to be cared for by her husband. And so she kind of works a little bit here and there, helping do office management type stuff at these businesses. And she's usually in the office at the facility where my studio is on Mondays. And so that's usually when I'll see her and we'll talk about patterns or fabric or whatever. So in an apartment above the office at this facility, there are 9 guys living who are the construction workers building another business that her husband owns and is getting off the ground somewhere else across town. And I'm there a lot, so I've kind of, noticed these guys, and I've never really said anything about it, never really talked to her about it. She's talked to me. And here are some of the things that she's told me. That a lot of workers that they were depending on to build this business have RUNNOFT'd because of ICE. Justifiably so. So they're behind on the construction, and the banksters, those kinds of criminals, the big time criminals, are coming down on them, because they're, on the hook for a couple $1 million of a loan, and the business isn't ready yet, and it's not open yet, and so the bank is trying to put them in default. So she's talking to me about all of that, related stress. And most of the time when this woman talks to me about gossipy related stuff, whether it's people in the sewing group or even stuff like this, I kind of try to keep it philosophical. But it has gotten to the point, the information I've gathered going in this little folder in my head has gotten to the point where I was like, I need to do something. So I'm getting there. So the next thing she tells me is that, not only are they kind of stressed because of the karma of some of the shady business practices they've been involved in. But, they've also, like, unfortunately, you lay down with dogs, you're going to get fleas. Well, are they the dogs or are they the fleas? They've got these other people. She has told me about that she hired this dude and his son-in-law, and come to find out after a certain period of time that they were both like fraudulently reporting their hours and embezzling money from them in the form of wages. And so she and her husband fired these people, and then those people decided that when they got caught with their one crime, they're going to commit another crime and extort this woman and her husband by threatening to turn them and the dudes living in the apartment above this office into ICE. And that's when I really started not being philosophical with her. When she was telling me about, all the stuff with the bank, I'm not even gonna go there. Sorry. I'm wasting everybody's time who's watching this video. Sorry. Anyway, so when she was telling me about these extortionists, that's when I was like, look, what if you had a girlfriend who's, had a boyfriend that you knew had some violent tendencies, and then outside of her presence, he said that he was so mad at her that he was going to kill her. Maybe you just thought it was like an idle threat, but you didn't warn your girlfriend. You're going to feel real fucking guilty if she ends up murdered. You're going to feel real shitty. Withholding information is a form of lying, and these are 9 grown men who deserve to be able to make decisions about their own welfare, regardless of your financial dependency on them and the fact that you have them as indentured servants basically living up there. The person who's extorting you, criminals don't de-escalate, and you've got 2 of them. You've got 2 grown men who are in on this conspiracy. What makes you think they're not going to come to your house and try to rob you? Or they're not smart. You don't catch the smart ones, right? So, you're dealing with problems don't get solved at the same level of intelligence as they were created. Well, my friend who's telling me all this also can't seem to see that there's any kind of a moral obligation to the folks who are living upstairs, that are depending on her and her husband for their lives. I'm like, somebody that they don't know about is making threats against them, but they're going to get shit, the SWAT team will do all this property damage. But not only that, and that's really what she was more worried about than anything, they'd bust out the windows. And I'm like, what about these dudes getting deported to Uganda or being tortured in these detention centers or fucking disappeared or dying? Or all of that just went right over her head. I didn't know that at the time. I gave her my 2 cents kind of thinking all right, first offly, if you're going to come and emotionally dump on me, then don't be surprised when I take no shit, which, we've had conflict like that before, at the very beginning of our friendship, and I thought that, I'm not going to have to deal with this woman, I can just rent my studio space, but, over, as the months would go by, she, like me, has a ethical value of, relationships that are solid and worth your time, can withstand a little bit of conflict and friction. And I don't expect people to get along as adults, I just expect people to have good manners. We're all different people, different temperaments, different places on the spectrum of, human personality. So, you don't necessarily, it's more likely than not that people are not going to get along. That's how I look at it. So, which is why this relationship has continued to develop. But at this point, I'm ready to torch it, because when we had this conversation and I kind of confronted her verbally and in writing. I was kind of thinking all right, well, this will give it a little bit of time for her to, her and her husband maybe to get their heads screwed on straight, that human lives are more important than money, and maybe do something about it. But no, that's not what happened. So Monday she comes in, and I'm, expecting to chat with her about patterns or whatever. No, she is completely sideways and torn out of the frame because the dudes upstairs had used some Fabuloso laundry soap or whatever, and she didn't like the smell of it. It had wafted from the apartment above down into the office, and she came into work and she just couldn't even work. And she was on the phone with her husband. She said, I shouldn't have to put up with that. And I was completely horrified. I didn't, and I was standing right there when she was, having this little hissy fit and getting her husband to feel really sorry for her so that she wouldn't have to work in the office that day. That's what I thought that it was all going to amount to. And she kind of got off the phone and was like, oh my God, I can't, I'm sorry I'm like this. And I was like, everybody's got a little something. Like, I didn't let her off the hook and justify her being, I mean, what are princesses if not imposing, overbearing, and demanding? Like, I didn't say that, but I did just say, like, we all have our quirks, right? And when I followed up with her about it later, or well, she followed up with me actually, she told me that her husband had called these guys and threatened them that if they didn't start using unscented laundry products, he was just going to take away their washing machine. And that's when I was like, these people's moral compass is pointing straight to fucking hell. Fucking rich people. Like, there have been a couple of times when I've kind of tried to point some things out to her, and and she's just admitted, like, I've got no idea about money, I don't worry about anything. And I'm like, yeah, as long as there's food in the fridge and a light on over your head, you're a good kitty. Anyway, but them not being able to appreciate the fact that they have gotten themselves involved with criminals that they have not been able to deal with because they're continuing to be extorted, and these criminals are threatening the lives of at least 9 grown adults, and they can't seem to figure out what to do about it. So I have been really wrestling with this for probably about a week and consulting with some folks that I trust and who know me well enough to know that, it's like, I'm not the self-appointed director of behavioral standards, right? Like, and then there's also sort of, mind your own knitting type of thing. But and the worst that could happen to me is I might show up one day and find that the windows have been all bashed out because, the SWAT team showed up in the middle of the night and hauled all these guys off to who the fuck knows where, and hopefully they still have all their body parts when they get there. But no, I can't sit around like that. So, I decided just to leave the head dude, like I know he speaks English, and I know that he's kind of the one who's been recruiting people. And I mean, we've kind of seen each other because I'm there a lot. Like, I'm aware of these guys. So I just decided, like, all right, well, I'm just going to write a note and address it to that person and leave it on the door that I know that they go in and out of, that's inside. This is a gated and locked facility. So, and just saying, like, I have some information and I would really like to share it with you because, there's a threat and there's danger. And if you want, give me a call. So we'll just have to see what happens. But